He holds a Master's of Law degree, LLM, from Georgetown University Law Center, and is a graduate of the Regent University School of Law in Virginia Beach, where he served as editor-in-chief of the Regent Journal of Law and Public Policy. It's my profound pleasure to introduce you now to Jordan Zeppler.
I'm going to spend a few minutes this afternoon, and Pam's done a great job, and some of the other speakers talking about the issue in the United States, and certainly we've worked on that at the American Center for Law and Justice. But we also, as was mentioned, have international affiliates we don't talk about as much in the media. We're not asked to come on Fox News to talk about that. So I want to use this opportunity just to let you know about that and some of the examples of the actual cases we've handled. On the periphery, I just want to say this. In the United States, we represent a lot of Christians who kind of started taking a stand against the ACLU and groups like that. In the early 1980s, you had the Moral Majority Christian Coalition and then groups like ours who fought it out in courts. But we never want to use the word persecution here, representing the Christians or about putting up a creche or a nativity scene during the holidays. Those are legal battles that we can win. Certainly it's targeted attacks against the majority religious faith in the country. But persecution is these clients we represent overseas. And I'll talk about that. On the outside as well, I actually just launched a blog for Washington Post called Religious Right Now, which kind of play on the words. They are getting attacked already today. Center for American Progress, Media Matters, Rachel Maddow's producer, Foreign Policy Magazine, all because of my work about the mosque, Sharia law, Oklahoma. I think this morning Media Matters said it was a hire for hate side, and about my description of the blog. So to understand exactly, to underscore here, even from the legal perspective, which is what we do at the American Center for Law and Justice, putting out the argument for our side, you're considered a hate monger, Islamophobic, and all these other words that get thrown at you, and you have to have very thick skin and just deal with it, because that's the reality we live in now. I'll tell you how we first got involved in any of these issues. We were contacted by a widows and orphans organization that we had never worked with before. They called our main number and to our office in Virginia Beach, and they said, we have a widow. Her husband ran the Palestinian Bible Society in Gaza City. Now, I'm not sure if you've ever heard about the Palestinian Bible Society. They have offices in Jerusalem, all over the West Bank, and they used to have offices in the Gaza Strip as well. As you know, Hamas took over the Gaza Strip and started imposing their own version of and style of Islamic law. To give you an example, out of about 1.5 million people that live there, there's 2,500 Christians. Out of those, 500 would be evangelical. So the 2,000 other would be more Orthodox faith. And he ran, her husband, Rami Ayab, ran the Bible store there. Mostly gave out food and provided internet service to Muslims. Just the reality of the population. Was not controversial, was not a controversial figure himself. The society office in Gaza City had been bombed a couple times at night when no one was there to send a message. But one day, Rami was kidnapped by Islamic Jihad, which is an offshoot of the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade, and these groups that operate within Hamas. Usually they're the ones responsible for the rockets going in Israel. And he was kidnapped, made one phone call to his wife, who was pregnant with his third child at the time. He was later dragged out into the streets the next day and killed in the street. So she faced a couple of problems, obviously. She had been targeted now as a liability for Hamas and the family because this was becoming a human rights problem for them. They didn't prosecute anyone. No one was ever arrested. They denied responsibility, but of course, this was done in the street, not by guys with masks on. So legally, could we go after them? No. I mean, we're not going to be able to operate in the Hamas courts of the Gaza Strip. That's not going to happen. But because of our relationship with Israel, so we have an office in Israel, we were able to start working on how we could get Pauline Ayad and her three children out of the Gaza Strip. And the reason why it was necessary, which we did not know about initially, was that there was a pending war about to begin that started 2 days after she got out of the Gaza Strip, but because there were local sheiks instituting their own version of Islamic law, saying, well, because the father's gone now, how about we adopt the children? And then they'll, of course, be raised Muslim. They were very young. So there was issues of concern with Islamic law and also just the safety of this family because of how they've been marked. So it took about 6 months, and we were working with these diplomatic angles. We were working with Palestinians. We'd never really done this before. Certainly we've been labeled as Zionists, so how is this going to work out? Even though they're Christians, are they still going to want to work with us? And there was initial concern about that, not with trusting us or trusting Israel, but how much is Israel responsible? Will that ever be said or not? And we were successfully, I got a call on Christmas Eve from the Israeli government after first talking to a border guard in the Gaza Strip, so you can imagine his affiliation when she walked up. Because there's a few cross points that were closed, but sometimes would open up. And I got a call from an Israeli official. It had to be 3 in the morning, and I'd been up all night working with her. And he said, you need to get on a plane right now, because this is going to happen within the next 24 hours. Tell her, keep going there, and eventually they'll open the gate, she'll walk through. So I fly over to Israel. I land in Israel. I've gotten a call from Pauline that she's now out. She had left the Gaza Strip, is in Israel, and now traveling to the West Bank. What she didn't tell me when I got the call, and I was called her just as the plane landed. But when I saw in the customs line, this little government section they have there on television on Sky News, the air raid just began on exactly where she just came from. So the border crossing that she used the day before while I was on the plane was blown up. It was destroyed. So you see how all of these things are, that was how we got involved in Christian persecution directly and publicly doing that. Since then we've opened up, we've done a lot of work with the Palestinian Bible Society, which is something, again, that the left doesn't want to report, that you're working with Palestinians, and you can work with Israel at the same time. We've also opened up a full-time office in Pakistan. I'm going to give you just a brief summation of real stories, real cases, so that you've got them for you. And one more thing I should probably say, internationally, we've done work, and we've had an office in Moscow for more than a decade. Same with France, the European Council of Europe. We do work in, we're about to open in South Korea, and do other work in Asia as well, and an office in Kenya, which has an Islamic law issue, and Zimbabwe. So Pauline's story was the first. The second that was in our office in Pakistan is still handling now is someone who, young man, Christian, operated a bookstore. His Muslim neighbor did not like the fact that the landlord would not rent the bookstore to him. So, and we see this a lot with persecution of Christians in Pakistan specifically. So, as is possible in a place like Pakistan, he was getting rid of some extra books and just burned them in the back. That's not a big deal there. The Muslim neighbor says he was burning a Quran, and he was doing it improperly. He's now committed blasphemy. He's now serving a life imprisonment sentence. This is a young Christian kid who was targeted not because of his faith, but because of economic reasons. So it's using the Christian minority status to target people even for economic reasons. And we're still working through this case right now. He's serving in prison right now. Another that we saw was a town that was attacked, Gojra, which got some more media attention, where you had 7 Christians burnt to death and their entire village destroyed. And we had to go in there not just with the legal assistance which we're providing, but also aid relief, which we're not an aid organization, but it was hot and people needed fans and food and somewhere to sleep. Just in a recent one with that Voice of the Cops has been working on is the Higazi case out of Egypt. He converted from Islam to Christianity and decided to make a little bit of a stand and say, you know what, I want my national identity part changed. What you may not know is that in most of these Islamic countries and in other countries around the world, you have that your faith is on your passport. So in Pakistan, it's on your passport, same in Egypt. He wanted it changed so his kids could go to Christian school, so he could have Christian names, he could name his children Christian names. And he went to court. He was brave. The court said no. Even with a religious freedom clause in the Egyptian constitution, and a government that claims to be secular, also has a clause in the constitution that says Sharia law governs, basically. So these judges can decide whenever they want to invoke that. Here's how they invoked it. The reason though they have religious freedom, the reason he cannot change his faith is because Islam is the most perfect faith, it's the final faith, and converting to Christianity would just be converting back to a faith that came before Islam. It's not perfect, it wasn't finished yet. And that was accepted reasoning. And he's now in hiding. So we're working at the United Nations, we're working at the European Court of Human Rights as well, to start putting pressure on the Egyptian government and the officials there to, one, change his identity, but two, to make sure he's protected, because now with this issuing of the court, he is, again, an apostate. There are this is a good reminder for the 2 major laws that are used, blasphemy is used when you say something that these Muslim leaders don't like, or governments. And apostasy is used when as a Muslim, you leave the faith. And both of them could be death penalties, life imprisonment sentences. Typically, people are not protected by courts. We had a client in Pakistan who was beat to death in a hospital room of a prison, chained to the bed, photos up of his website, alive one day, beaten badly, almost paralyzed by police before his trial for blasphemy, was then beaten to death a day later, in jail, at the hospital in the jail. So these stories are not, they're not just things to talk about, they're actual cases that are going on that we've decided, whether it's in Pakistan and it may be difficult, or a place like the Gaza Strip or Egypt, that instead of only talking about them, let's make legal documents. And we've done this with Iran, with post-election violence there, and the targeting of people who spoke out. And there were a lot of Christians involved in that opposition, obviously, in the Green Movement. One of them was someone, again, who was a Muslim. So here we're moving from predominantly Sunni Islam, Shia Islam. Christian woman as well, Muslim woman as well, converts, and she was basically being chased around Iran to be killed, to be executed. And what we see is twofold. One, sometimes it's the government publicly endorsing the murder of these Christians. But two, it's the government doing nothing at all. So basically, you can kill the Christian minority, you can kill the apostates. There's no trial for you. Maybe a slap on the wrist. Sometimes they will actually have an actual trial, but usually they'll be found not guilty. Sometimes they'll serve a week in jail. But for political reasons, these people never receive the full extent of the law or justice. So this woman fled to the United States, and we were able, because of apostasy laws on the books in Iran, she got asylum here. So that's another part of this entire story, which is that working with those who have left, who have fled successfully on asylum. We've done it with people out of Syria, with people out of the UAE, all converts. And sometimes extreme cases, one out of Syria whose father was a leader in Hezbollah. And these are the kind of people, though, who are going to tell the stories. And if they don't believe it from us, even with the case, even with the photos, I think people will start believing it from them. But we have to work with them and overcome some of these boundaries of, well, they're from Syria, so they must hate the United States even if they're Christian. Or they're Palestinians, so they hate you because you support Israel, and even though they're Christians. And it's just not true. And those are the stories we're trying to get out through the legal work we're doing, but trying to offer sophisticated legal work to people who are the most persecuted in the world because of their faith. And I will tell you, recently now we're being active in southern Sudan. In Kenya there's a Sharia law issue. And it's always the same concern. We know that if we don't meet these demands, and Kenya's an interesting example, it's 75% Christian. But the whole eastern coast is basically Muslim, especially in the northeast by Somalia and Ethiopia. It's people just flowing in off the border. They wouldn't show the World Cup in those parts because of Islamic law. Now, this is in a secular state with a constitution, but the government allowed that to happen. They have said if they're not allowed to have their own Islamic court system, they will secede. So it's not playing by the same, no. What's on the Supreme Court here? This is kind of how I'm going to close. Equal justice under law. It's the basis of the United States of America. It's the fact that if you're an atheist, a Jew, a Buddhist, if you're white, if you're black, if you're an immigrant, if your family came over on the Mayflower, under the law, what we strive for is everyone to be treated equal. And what we know under Islamic law, in places where you start allowing another legal system to develop within, like the UK or Canada, and giving jurisdiction over, ceding jurisdiction, you can destroy democracy from within. And that's the stated goal of the Muslim Brotherhood. That's the stated goal who founded CARE. Their goal is to how do you destroy the West from the inside. And you destroy America by replacing equal justice under law with everyone has their own court system to operate in. Because then we're not the greatest country in the world anymore. We're not America. And I believe that part of our role as that country now, though, is for all of us to start speaking on these issues. The American Center for Law and Justice doing that. We're working with the Coptic Christians. So it's evangelical Christians coming together, working with the Copts, working with the Catholic Church, working with the persecuted church, and in Jewish organizations, secular organizations, for the rights of freedom and just liberty, and the people to make up their own mind about their religious faith. Because to me, that doesn't sound so religious right or right wing. Thank you.